Introducing the new Volvo XC90 with 7-seat versatility, Google built-in, and advanced safety features for all your precious cargo. The new Volvo XC90, designed for life. Visit volvocars.com/US to learn more.
Now more than ever, Lowe's knows you don't just want a low price, you want the lowest price. And with our lowest price guarantee, you can count on us for competitive prices on all your home improvement projects. If you find a qualifying lower price somewhere else on the same item, we'll match it. Lowe's, we help, you save. Price match applies to same item, current price at qualifying retailers. Exclusions and terms apply. Learn how we'll match price at lowes.com/lowest price guarantee.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold!
Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. New customer offer for first 3 months only. Speed slow after 35 gigabytes if network's busy. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.
Welcome to the World of Martial Arts TV. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having us. My name is Sojin Kim, and I am a curator at the Smithsonian, and I just worked with the Smithsonian Asian Pacific American Center, as well as with Terence and Harry, on producing an exhibition which is currently on view at the Smithsonian American Art Museum. It is called Sightlines Chinatown and Beyond, and it is about the connections of Asian Americans to the cultural and physical terrain of Washington, D.C., and the topic of Asian martial arts figures heavily into this exhibition. So that's why I'm here with these two other guests.
Fantastic. So I want to know everything about this Smithsonian and who's involved and how you're involved and how people can enjoy this exhibition on what you're doing. So let's start with Terence. Tell us about this thingies that you've put to the Smithsonian and what it represents.
Oh, thank you for the question. So my teacher, C.C. Liu, I studied under him and started in 1994 in Chinatown in Washington, D.C. And I was with him for 10 years. And after that 10 years, I went to train with Grandmaster Liu Shaoling, but I was still C.C. Liu's like my grandfather. So he had a little shop in Chinatown. And so I would go on weekends and look after the shop. And he would, whenever he would travel, and I would just visit him and sit with him. But around 2016, he was evicted from this place. And I found this out because one of my Kung Fu brothers called me and said, Master Liu's stuff is all in the street. You need to come here now. And so I called a couple of my students, and we all met there, and we helped get him, situated and get his stuff in storage and everything. He was cool as a cucumber the whole time. I was really, that day was a hard day for me. But then before we went our separate ways that day, he gave me, I was his last Kung Fu student. He gave me his the school banner and a box full of Kung Fu sashes, which when we had tests, he would give them, but he had a bunch of them. So he gave me those, and he gave me an envelope with some photographs of him and his son when his son was young, and told me to give them to his son. And so that was really a tough day, and I wasn't sure what to do with all of these things, with all of this information. And the great master, Raymond Wong, who was from Wong Chinese Boxing Association, he's a great friend of mine. I called him, and I was like, Master Wong, Sifu has got his store closed up, and he's been evicted, and I don't know what this means. Do I start a school? What do I do? And Master Wong told me, he said, the school is inside of you. So it doesn't matter whether you're teaching in someone's backyard or whatever. And so when he said that, so I started work. I had an idea to make some kind of a jacket piece back in 2000, but it didn't have anything to do with Kung Fu. But it's sort of like to me that piece, the piece that I have in the show, Safety Jacket, to me it's like if you, let's say if you want to write a love song, and you have a melody and you have a title for the song, but you've never been in love, um, and so you don't have the lyrics, and so this piece to me was like, when these things transpired, I had the lyrics to the song finally. I I took my kung fu jacket, I hung it on the wall, and then I began to construct this piece using the sashes. And so for me, the piece is a monument to what Chinatown means to me in terms of, like, I grew up in DC, and I remember what it looked like when I was a kid, and when I got older. It's also it's layers, and it's also sort of a monument to my relationship with my first, with my kung fu teacher. Um, and then it's also, I guess, at a more personal level, sort of about that conversation that I had with Raymond Wong, where it's like when I was a new student, it was all sort of external. When I put my uniform on, I felt strong, but after time you practice it, and it's like, well, actually, um, it's an inside thing now. And so the piece, and the last thing I'll mention about it was that I'm really a strong believer in manifesting things. And so when I made the piece originally, I wrote on a little piece of paper that I wanted it to be shown in a perfect place in Chinatown. And then I put that in my little box, and then I tried to promote it myself. No, the local banks, anybody, they didn't pay attention to me. And so this piece sort of, it was supposed to go to Florida. It was supposed to go to Art Basel, that fell through. Um, and it took this really long, winding sort of a road, and then it ends up in the perfect place in Chinatown at the time it's supposed to be there. So
what's when you say there's a change to DC? What is those changes? What's the change that you're talking about?
gentrification, colonization, pilgrimification. It's the pilgrimification of, no, when I was a kid, the Chinatown area was spread out over several blocks. By the early 2000s, it really got condensed to like a block, if and now maybe, if you want to call it that. So, and the irony of that to me is that when this aggressive sort of redevelopment was taking place, this is when they were putting, like Chinese, Chinese characters on signs and stuff, like it was historical, you know. But in my view, it's like it's as if the developers were saying, yeah, this is not like this is history, but like, yeah, this is history.
Yeah.
That's how I took it, and because and I joke with Sojin about this a lot. Like, I find the irony of a person that looks like me having such a tie to Chinatown. It's what it is. It's kind of how it had played out in my life. But it's the I think the cultural elements of Chinatown as I knew it growing up were a lot visibly more evident, and you could see and you could smell it, and now it's just not so much. And I'm seeing the same thing happen in Philadelphia as well, by the way.
Yeah. Thank you. Sojin and Rick, what's the experience that people are going to get from coming to the Smithsonian, and the martial arts experience that they're going to get off Chinatown and stuff like that? Can you explain us what you're going to see and what you're trying to get across?
Sure, I'd be happy to answer that. And afterwards, I'd love to defer to Harry to talk about his experiences, because Harry is also DC native, born and raised here, spent a lot of time in Chinatown as a young person. And also his his archive, his personal archive, the photographs he took, the photographs he saved over the years, and all the ephemera from the different programs and events, both martial arts and Chinatown and Asian American stuff, is really one of the main archives upon which we built this exhibition. So I'd love for Harry to also follow that train of thought. But I can tell you a little bit about the exhibition and what we hope visitors will feel when they come to it, and how they might reimagine or understand or reconsider where exactly they are. So the Smithsonian American Art Museum is in this beautiful, I don't know if it's marble, a beautiful white building with columns. It's a building that was built in the 1800s, and it's in the area that is actually now also the historical Chinatown. But it's a building where people come to it. They are coming to see either the National Portrait Gallery, which is based in that museum, or the American Art Museum. And they're not necessarily thinking that there is a community around them, a historic neighborhood where people lived and had businesses, and that it was specifically Chinatown. People make really light of DC's Chinatown because it is not of the scale of, say, New York or San Francisco. And because of the changes, as Terence has mentioned, you don't necessarily see a lot of the residential population anymore. This is a population of maybe 300 Asian Americans, largely elderly, living in Chinatown from a high of probably 3,000 in the early 1970s. So just to give you a sense of that change. But so that's one of the things is we just want people, we're in a gallery. It's a very small gallery, but it has 4 big windows that literally look out onto G Street in Chinatown. And so we really try to begin people by saying, hey, you are here. Look where you are. You are right here in the historic Chinatown. If you look through those windows, you're looking out to a neighborhood that is DC's historic Chinatown. And so we are trying to really it's like a compass, trying to reorient people to where they are and to say, like, this is a great museum. You're going to see great things here, but also just want to remind you where you're standing and what some of this history is. And so the way in which that relates to the general purpose of the exhibition is through this exhibition, through really just 3 very condensed clusters of stories, we are trying to just make visible the fact that there have been Asian Americans living in Washington, D.C. over many decades and generations, and that their connections to D.C. are deep. They run deep. And so we begin that in Chinatown because we're located in Chinatown. We can see, we have the sight line into Chinatown, and also because D.C.'s Chinatown is probably the most visible and well-known space in the city that people associate with Asian Americans. And so there's basically 3 sections to the exhibition that we explore. We explore the idea of place, making place, and that's where we focus on Chinatown, the point where we're standing in the gallery in Chinatown. But we also want to take people beyond Chinatown. So so the 3 sections are making place. So that's really looks at Chinatown and unpacks Chinatown. And again, largely based on much of the documentation and things that Harry has collected over the years. Another section takes the vantage of an individual artist. And so that is based around an artist whose mother is from the island of Java in Indonesia. And she was a graffiti artist, probably one of the few female graffiti artists in DC in the 1990s. She now makes, sanctioned public art and murals. And there's probably like 24 of her works all around DC, visible, present in public spaces. So we trying to, again, make visible the idea of that there is this art that's being created. There are these people who have these connections to space in different communities, and their stuff is right out there. It's there in plain sight if you know how to look. And then the 3rd section we focus on is thinking about culture and tradition and community and the way that these things are always transforming and changing and how diverse they are. And that's where we focus on martial arts. And we use martial arts as a way to think about social history and cultural history. We look at it as this great, a place where we can tell really interesting stories about Asian Americans, immigrant entrepreneurs, essentially, who became these early teachers of Asian martial arts in DC. It's a place where we can talk about popular culture, as you mentioned, Andrew, the importance of Bruce Lee in helping take knowledge of Asian martial arts to a global audience. It's a place where we can think about just a whole the way many different things, sports, creativity, all intersect. But what I love about it is it's about this idea of community, and it's a community that involves Asian Americans, but it is not defined by race. It actually is a community that is diverse ethnically, racially, culturally, generationally, and that there is such a strong sense of lineage and community. And that's what really captured our attention and made us want to use martial arts as the story that we would tell about sort of culture and tradition and the way in which tradition transforms over time. So if people are looking for Asian Americans in DC, it's not like the obvious things like this is Asian because it is an Asian person or because it has, like Terence said, Chinese writing. To find connections of Asian Americans, the presence of Asian Americans in DC, you have to look in a different way. And that's the idea of Sightlines.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. But I have one little thing, because you talked about an artist, and in your press package or whatever, there is a picture of the traditional flying kick martial artist in DC with the White House in the background, I think. Could you tell us a little bit about that? I'm quite interested, because I know what that flying kick means. I know where it's from, but I think the artist who's ever done it has done a great job. So do you know anything about that picture?
I'll tell you a little bit about that. So that is actually a graphic that was created by our colleagues at the Smithsonian who produce a podcast, which is called Side Door. Right. And they did a podcast that riffed on, and Terence is actually in it, that riffed on one of the characters, the people, the historic figures that we introduced in the Sightlines exhibition in the martial arts section. And so they created that graphic based on some of the stories they heard, but also I think based on an artifact which we have on display in the exhibition, which is from Harry's collection. And it is the cover of a tournament from Harry. Is it 1967 or 68? It's the one with Jun Rhee. Basically, it shows Jun Rhee, who people think of as the father of Taekwondo, and he is doing a sidekick. And the way that the photograph is captured in this, on the cover of this tournament program, is his foot is going up so high, and it's placed in just the right way that it looks like he's kicking the very top of the Capitol dome. But Harry can probably tell you more about those tournaments, because he actually went to them in the late 1960s.
Okay, I think it's over to Harry. Come on, Harry. But it sounds like you've given an awful lot to this exhibition. So first of all, let's just talk about your martial arts, just a little bit, and how you've evolved through the martial arts, and how your own personal journey has, changed you from being whatever you were. I think that's what the thing that we wanted to talk about is, growing up in Chinatown, and then what martial arts has done for you, what it could do for others, and what you've given to the Smithsonian in this exhibition. Over to you, Harry.
I grew up, being a Chinese person in America, and I was always reminded that I was different and teased a lot. So I didn't have a lot of pride. But then when the martial arts stuff and Bruce Lee came out, it gave me more of a sense of pride in myself and in our culture. And so that's what happened to me. And I used to hang out with a lot of friends who practiced martial arts. And we go to like Meridian Hill Park, which is Malcolm X Park, they used to call it one time. And then we go to Rock Creek Park and we would practice. And then we would go to New York City to go to see those kung fu movies. And they had kung fu movies here in DC, but they had at the Circle Theater. And and they only showed it on weekends. So we went up to New York City, saw Fist of Fury at the Pagoda Theater there.
Can you show us the front cover of that? Can you show us the front cover?
This one right here?
Is that what's the front? Can you turn it around and show us the other side? Wow. Right. So so that's the big boss. That's the big boss.
That's the first time I ever saw it. When I went
and in America, it got changed to Fists of Fury.
Yeah. Yep.
Sorry.
So yeah, I used to hang out with a lot of people that used to practice martial arts. So I'm sort of what you call it, jack of all trades and a master of none. Because I used to hang out with a bunch of people and work out. But I did go to enroll in the Joga school, and I was there for a while, and Hungar school, Alan Yee's Hungar school, and I was there for a short while, and so and I always worked out with friends who at various styles. So I practiced like 7-star praying mantis, Joga, Hungar, um, Wing Chun, specifically Yun K San Wing Chun. I like that style particularly, instead of Yip Man. But yeah, we used to hang out with a lot of people that used to go to New York City to eat and watch kung fu movies there.
What was your favorite kung fu movie at that time? Come on, there must have been one.
Huh? Well, the very first one I saw that I really liked was Dragon Inn. The old Dragon Inn.
The old Dragon Inn, the original,
Yeah, they
not,
did
not,
a new one.
not Dragon Gate Inn with Donnie Yen. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And so, and also then they started showing Bruce Lee movies in New York City. And that's the first time I ever saw Big Boss and Fist of Fury in New York City's Chinatown.
So so you were saying that you'd been to some of the tournaments. Come on, tell us about tournaments you go to. That must have had a great experience, and especially if you was Jun Rhee was there, Taekwondo.
I went to Jun Rhee's tournaments and Ki Wang Kim. Ki Wang Kim's champion who won the tournament was Chuck Norris.
Wow.
That's the first time I saw Chuck Norris, but he wasn't famous then. And he walked past me, and that was Ki Wang Kim's champion. Jun Rhee's champion was Joe Louis.
Wow, right.
So they both had their champions.
Yeah.
Those were good times.
Yeah.
And then I met Bruce Lee when he was at Jun Rhee's tournament, and he was. I tried to get his autograph of the first year he was there, and there was a crowd around him. And as I approached him trying to get his autograph, he got whisked away. All of a sudden, he disappeared on me. And then the second time, the next year, I was shocked to see him sitting there with his wife and kid by himself. He was waiting for somebody to pick him up, and I ran up to him, and I got his autograph, and I got Linda to sign. And Brandon, he was like about 4 years old. He just drew like a mark on my program.
Well, Harry, that puts you up there, really up with him. If you struggle to get the autograph of Bruce, I do have one, but I never met him, unfortunately. I've done enough, but that's fantastic.
He was a nice guy.
Did you meet him? Did Bruce do any demonstrations at the?
The second year he came, his wife, he put on a demonstration with his wife Linda. He attacked her like 5 or 6 times consecutively, and she would look like she picked him up and threw him on the ground. and when he hit the stage was made out of plywood, so when he landed, it would boom. You can hear it reverberate throughout. But he attacked her 5 times, and she would throw him down, and he would hit the mat, and it would just went boom. It was amazing.
Yeah,
so she knew her stuff too.
What was the audience like when Bruce was around and June? What was that? What was the because this is martial arts. We're talking this experience that you've had, and now you're sharing it at the Smithsonian. What was the experience at that time of martial arts, and how was it? Because remember, at that time it was very karate oriented. Suddenly you've got an Oriental, you've got a Chinese guy there. How did they accept it? And you can see where I was coming from with Bruce and Wing Chun. You were showing that women could do martial arts.
Well, it was sort of like a new thing, and he was the epitome of the big proponent of that style, or representative of that style, and he seemed to do it more efficiently and beautifully than any of the other practitioners. To me, when he would throw his punch or throw his kick, he threw it with enough authority. It looked like if it hit you, it would hurt.
Yeah.
Because you can see it in the movies, the way he throws his kicks and punches and the way he moves. It was with a lot of authority and efficiency that you envisioned if it hit you, it would really hurt.
Yeah. I think, Harry, I'd want to share you something here. We've just interviewed one of the guys that was on one of the thugs in Way of the Dragon. And he said, he says, when you see Bruce Lee on the screen, that was Bruce Lee. He could do that stuff, you know. When he punched and when he kicked, he definitely, you know, you might have had some padding on it, but you definitely, you know, you took the blows. Let's move away from that, but that's fantastic. That's great. It's an honor. I love to speak to anybody who you know, he's my icon, and I'm not going to move away from it. At my age anyway now. So you've given an awful lot to the Smithsonian and to this exhibition. What is there? What have you brought along? It looks like you've got hundreds of pieces of memorabilia. Don't be lending the Bruce Lee autograph. You might not see it again. But
no, I have a photocopy of it. That's what I lend out.
Oh, you send me one then. So tell us everything and explain to you what you're going to see of your collection there and what it means to you.
Well, it's a collection of stuff I treasure. A lot of his books. I got his like a book, one of his first book that he wrote. He wrote the book, The Tao of Kung Fu to Make Money. You know, to make a little extra spare change. And so I heard it was a limited edition, and I lucked out and got it from a friend of mine who needed some money, and he had a copy, and he sold it to me for $5.
Yeah, well, it goes for silly money now. It's the Bruce Lee's Chinese philosophical kung fu. But that's the one to have.
Yeah, that was a great find. So, but you know, I'm a collector, so I like to collect anything and everything that has to do with martial arts and the historical aspects of it. You know, and I collect a lot of posters like this one from the Pagoda Theater in New York City when they first showed Big Boss and Fist of Fury.
Yeah,
and this is the flyer for it, and so I saved it. And then we showed movies here in D.C. Area at the Circle Theater, and I saved the Circle Theater flyer of Dragon Inn.
Wow!
And so, and they only showed it every Sunday. It wasn't a regular thing. It was only on Sunday. At the Circle Theater on Pennsylvania Avenue, there was another theater somewhere in Bethesda that showed it on weekends. So it's weekends too. And over there, I got to tell you, there, I remember when I was in the theater, and when the movie was over with, everybody was coming out, and guess who I bumped into? Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was there.
Wow.
He was a martial art fan. He knew Bruce Lee, and so he would go to a lot of movies. So I bumped into him. The first time I bumped into him, this guy, I was sitting in the movie theater. The movie was about to start, and this guy sat in front of me, had a huge afro. And I tapped him on the shoulder and say, "Excuse me, can you scoot down a little bit?" He turned around, looked at me, and said, "No." And then I said, "Oh shit, excuse the language." But I was watching the movie, cocks at the side. It was a terrible movie, by the way, so I didn't miss anything. And after it was over with, the guy stood up. He kept getting taller and taller and taller. I said, "Oh crap, this guy was huge." And he was walking up the aisle. All the Chinese people were at his hip, and he put on this UCLA jacket. So I said, "Oh, I tapped Kareem on the shoulder."
It's a good job. Put you in the basket. Did you know at that time that he'd been in a film with Bruce Lee?
No. I didn't know.
No. Yeah, because he trained with Bruce in LA a lot of the time.
Actually, I didn't know who he was. A friend of mine tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Guess who that is?" That's Lou Alcindor.
Yeah, that's his original name. Yeah. So you're not telling us exactly what's at the Smithsonian. Come on, if I turned up there, you know, if I flew over and came up, what am I going to see? Come on, what's Harry going to give? What have I got to enjoy? What's going to be there that says you? And what does it mean to you?
I think there's a photocopy of the Bruce Lee autograph. Linda Lee signed it, and Brandon signed it. I have various Bruce Lee books, and there's movie posters, like I show you, these things, Circle Theater. I don't know, it's just a lot of...
Can I butt in? Just because we looked at so much stuff of Harry's that he probably can't remember everything the things that we borrowed and the things that we didn't end up using, but we borrowed also. So I can tell you like for sure. So first of all, we don't have the Bruce Lee autograph on display, just so that you don't get too excited and come only for that. But we have, so Harry has this is the kind of stuff that maybe like the average person might not think is interesting, but if you are like a DC person or if you are a martial arts person, it's like gold, the kinds of things that Harry has. So he like kept the ticket stubs for like tournaments in Virginia and DC and Maryland and Pennsylvania and New York. So you can like see the range of things and events that people were doing in the 60s and the 1970s. So a lot of different ticket stubs. The program books for the tournaments include Jun Rhee's tournament, as well as he mentioned Kiwon Kim, who was another martial artist who I think is really interesting because he's a Korean immigrant who's doesn't have the same profile as Jun Rhee. He came at around the same time in the 1960s, opened a school in 1962, and was training really champions through the 1960s. And one of the so anyway, so Harry has like programs of his school. He has programs at the Jiaoga school, the first Jiaoga Kung Fu school that actually taught formally Chinese martial arts to people besides like, the people in the Chinese community, that actually opened up and taught it in a methodical way. He has the flyers for Willie Lin's school. Yeah, Tian Tian Pai. I'm just naming a small fraction of things, but flyers, brochures, posters, ticket stubs, and then great snapshots. Just like Harry, you're a photographer. Yeah. So he took photos of his friends hanging out. He took home movie footage of like martial arts demonstrations at Chinatown street fairs, or of his friends just like kicking around on the schoolyard.
That's that's where I wanted. Thank you, Sojin. I think that's where what I wanted to fill in there. So that's sort of like gives the epitome of what it's going on. But would you say that the exhibition gives a highlight of the Asian martial arts community in DC at a certain time or throughout a certain amount of time?
I would say it really focuses on the early, when Asian martial arts begins to open up and go beyond sort of the co-ethnic communities, right? And so it's really this moment in the 1960s and 1970s that we highlight. And Terence grew up in this period of the 70s and 80s, but he also represents sort of the continuity and where things went and changed beyond that. But so a lot of the people we wanted to make sure that were represented were some of the first teachers in DC in these different schools. So it really is looking at just this interesting moment in US history, in DC history, where, you have civil rights, you have ethnic consciousness movements, you have a lot of people thinking about different ways to empower themselves, to protect themselves, to defend themselves, to create community. And Asian martial arts becomes one of the means for doing that in this really interesting moment of just cultural change in the US in general. You have immigration bringing new sorts of people into contact with one another. You have some of the first immigrant teachers definitely in the DC area, setting up schools and finding, people interested in what they're doing. So it really tries to sort of set the stage for that particular moment, because of course it changes and explodes and goes multiple other directions later on. But we were really interested in capturing that moment, and definitely like Harry's collection totally like captures that moment.
I got to say, at that time period, Jiaoga was established in DC, but other people had other interests besides Jiaoga. So there was a phenomenon going on at that time where a lot of people, quite a few people, went up to New York because they offer more variety, so they can practice 7-star praying mantis, Hungar, other styles that are not available in DC. So there was about a bunch of people traveling every weekend to New York City just to practice.
I just want to tag on something to that, because Harry mentioned taking the bus to New York to watch the films. And just, it also is a reminder that in this moment before like YouTube and the internet, where you can get access and watch anything, like people went to really great effort to learn and grow their knowledge. And so like, I think about all these DC kids who would like get on the bus and go to New York, like 4 or 5 hours, sit in a movie theater all day, get on the bus and come back, because that was where they were going to sort of see more expansive range of things, going up there to see the different classes, going up there to tournaments, Harry like mail orders magazines and books to grow his library. But it really it took a lot of effort then. It wasn't like it was just right there for the grabbing.
It was the empowerment of martial arts at that time. The 70s was the big powerhouse, and it's nice to see that we were all in some ways infected. And by doing that, you feel as though I was very demure at that time. I don't know how Harry felt, but I think I'd like you just to discuss this in the fact that, and Harry might want to throw it, and also Terence, is that by martial arts, it empowers you a little bit more. You don't feel as threatened from, being an ethnic minority at that time, maybe. What do you think?
Before the martial arts came out, I was teased a lot growing up, because being a minority of a minority, I would get teased quite often. But as the martial art boom at that time period, exposure-wise in movies and TV, I seemed to accumulate more friends, and we were all interested in martial arts, and we all started practicing together, And so it's sort of like a big cultural education device that connect everybody to the Asian culture.
Yeah,
and made it, made everybody more appreciative of that culture.
Yeah, Terence, have you got anything to add there, mate?
Sure. Well, what I can share is that when I first started training with Master Liu, with CC Liu in Chinatown, I was an angry guy. I was I would have to admit, and over time, practicing changed my temperament. It had an effect on my temperament. I remember when I first started training, I couldn't wait to get into a fight. I just couldn't wait. And my older Kung Fu brothers were telling me, yeah, if you see trouble, you should run. And I was like, what? And then 10 years later, I remember a guy jumped out of his car and started calling me all sorts of ethnic slurs. And I thought we were going to have a fight in the street, but I didn't. And then I went back down to my school and I told my teacher about what happened. And he told me, 10 years later, he says, well, you have Kung Fu, so you didn't need to fight. And the sort of paradox in that was I felt really interesting. Like on the front end, they were telling me to avoid a fight. And then 10 years later, they were telling me, now you have these skills, so you can make your adjustments ahead of time. So it's had a profound, and then now that I'm older and I've taught, a number of students and I've competed a lot, it's training in martial arts has affected my temperament, has affected my idea about time, like not chronological time, but just time in the sense of the time it takes to master a thing. So that plays out when I'm making art, and it plays out in my patience with myself in terms of a learning curve and this sort of a thing. So it's so my teachers have helped me to grow up effectively.
So what would you say your goal would be? And I have a little thing here that I would love you to do as a maybe revisit this at some point, because I think it's a fantastic exhibition. I think it's something that should be done a little bit more often. Not enough people are putting this forward, and I think Sojin and Ricky have done a great job here. What do you feel about taking some of Harry's stuff and putting it into a little booklet, something like that, and expressing what the exhibition was at some point? Or is that already done in a program? I don't know. I'm just asking.
Well, I can tell you two things. I can tell you that if you go online, we have something that we're calling the Sightlines Atlas, which is an online component to the exhibition that tells some of the stories from the exhibition, but also tells an additional variety of stories about Asian Americans in DC. But there is a really nice piece in there, which is essentially Harry talking. It's an excerpt from an oral history, Harry talking about himself and his relationship to martial arts, and we loop over his voice a bunch of his home movie footage from the 60s and 1970s of friends performing martial arts. So that's one place where you can see some of Harry's stuff. We are in the process of putting together a printed piece. I don't know how widely we're going to distribute it. It is definitely minimally going to the people who contributed to the exhibition, but it's a way that we are documenting the text and the items that are all in the exhibition, and both Terence's materials as well as Harry's are represented in that. And that's actually in production right now.
Fantastic. That sounds like a must-have in my book, but there we go. Thank you so much for sharing everything. It's been amazing. I'm sure our viewers are going to be really excited about watching this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.